My wife used to snap her fingers at me in front of my friends like I was a dog. The last time she did it, nobody came to her defense. I married B when I was 27. She was confident, sharp, the kind of person who owned every room she walked into. I loved that about her in the beginning. What I didn't realize until later was that B didn't just want to be in charge of every room. She wanted to be in charge of me, and she wanted everyone to see it. The first time it happened was about a year into our marriage. We were at a barbecue at my friend Reggie's house. I was telling a story to the group, and B interrupted me mid-sentence and said, "Babe, you're telling it wrong," then retold the entire thing her way. Everyone just kind of went quiet and looked at me. I laughed it off. Told myself she was just being B. After that, it got worse. Every time we were around people, she found a way to make me small. She'd correct me in conversations, answer questions directed at me. If I ordered something at a restaurant, she'd change it and tell the waiter he actually wants this instead. She'd call me her project in front of couples we barely knew. One night at a dinner party, she told a table of 8 people that I couldn't even boil water when she met me, and that everything I knew about being a functioning adult came from her. Everyone laughed. I didn't. I brought it up that night. Told her it embarrassed me when she talked about me like that. She said I was being sensitive and that she was just joking. I told her jokes are supposed to be funny for both people. She said I needed to relax. That became her answer every time. "You're being sensitive. It's a joke. Relax." She shut down every conversation before it started. Then the snapping started. About 2 years in, she started literally snapping her fingers at me when she wanted something. Not in private, in front of people. She'd snap and point at her empty glass. Snap and gesture toward the kitchen. Snap and tap the seat next to her like she was calling a dog over. The first time she did it in front of Reggie and our friend Hal, I just stared at her. She raised her eyebrows and said, "What? I need a refill." Reggie looked at the ground. Hal checked his phone. Nobody said a word. So she kept doing it. I stopped bringing friends around the house because I knew what was going to happen. She'd perform. She'd find some way to show them that she ran everything, and I was just there. If someone complimented my cooking, she'd say I taught him that. If someone asked about my job, she'd jump in and explain it like I wasn't standing right there. When I stopped hosting, she complained that I was isolating us. I couldn't win either way. About 8 months ago, Reggie invited us to his birthday dinner at a steak place downtown. About 12 people there. B was in a good mood, being charming the way she could be when she wanted to. Halfway through dinner, I was talking to Hal about a fishing trip we were planning. B leaned across me, snapped her fingers twice in Hal's direction and said, "Excuse me, I need to borrow my husband." Then she told me to go ask the waiter for more bread. She didn't ask. She told me, with a snap, in front of 12 people. I put my napkin down and looked at her. I said, "B, you have 2 working legs and a voice. If you want bread, you can ask the waiter yourself." I've never spoken to her like that in public before. She stared at me for about 3 seconds and then said, "Wow, someone's in a mood tonight." She tried to laugh it off. Nobody laughed with her. Reggie looked right at her and said, "He's right, B. That was rude." Hal didn't say anything, but he nodded. B's face changed completely. She went from confident to something smaller in maybe 2 seconds. Her mouth opened like she was going to say something, but nothing came out. Then she grabbed her purse and stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. She walked to the bathroom without looking at anyone. The table went quiet. I could hear forks hitting plates and the low music playing from speakers somewhere. Reggie reached over and squeezed my shoulder. Nobody said anything for a long time. When B came back, her makeup was fixed and her face was blank. She sat down and picked up her fork and ate like nothing happened. But she didn't look at me once for the rest of dinner. When everyone started saying goodbye in the parking lot, B walked straight to our car without waiting for me. I found her sitting in the passenger seat staring straight ahead. I got in and started the engine. She didn't say a word. The silence felt thick and heavy. I kept glancing at her, but she just stared out the window. Her jaw was tight and her hands were folded in her lap so hard her knuckles looked white. 20 minutes of nothing but the sound of tires on pavement. When I pulled into our driveway, she had the door open before I even put the car in park. She got out and slammed it hard enough that I actually jumped. I sat there for a second, watching her walk to the front door. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I followed her inside. She went straight to the bedroom and shut the door. Not a slam this time, but firm enough that I heard the click of the latch. I stood in the kitchen with my keys still in my hand. The house felt too quiet. Part of me wanted to go in there and smooth everything over and make it normal again. But another part of me, a bigger part, kept thinking about how normal was the problem. Normal was her snapping her fingers at me. Normal was her telling me what to do in front of everyone. Normal was me just taking it and pretending it was fine. I grabbed a blanket from the closet and lay down on the couch. The bedroom door stayed closed. No yelling, no arguments, just silence. It felt different from her usual cold shoulder routine. Heavier, like something cracked that we couldn't put back together. I stared at the ceiling and listened to the house settle around me. Every little creak and pop seemed loud. I kept seeing the look on B's face when Reggie called her out. I kept remembering how Hal nodded, how the whole table just watched her try to laugh it off and nobody helped her. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the restaurant, saw her face, saw Reggie speaking up, saw myself putting my napkin down and telling telling her to get her own bread. I'd never done anything like that before, never pushed back in public. The clock on the cable box said 3 in the morning, then 4, then 5. I heard B's alarm go off at 6:30. The shower turned on. I lay there listening to the water run and wondering what was going to happen when she came out. The bedroom door opened, and I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. I heard her walk into the kitchen, heard the coffee maker start, heard her pouring cereal into a bowl. I opened my eyes and sat up. She was standing at the counter with her back to me, dressed for work in dark pants and a white shirt. I stood up and walked into the kitchen. She moved to the sink and rinsed her bowl without looking at me. I cleared my throat. She didn't respond. I opened the cabinet and got a mug, poured myself coffee. She walked past me to grab her purse and our arms almost touched, but she angled away at the last second. I took a sip, even though it was too hot. She checked her phone, put it in her purse, picked up her keys. I said good morning. She looked at me for the first time since we got home. Her face was perfectly calm, but her eyes were cold. She said good morning, back in this polite voice that somehow felt worse than if she'd yelled at me. Like I was a stranger she had to be nice to, but didn't actually want to talk to. She walked to the door, stopped with her hand on the knob, turned halfway back. She said, "We'll talk tonight." It didn't sound like an invitation. It sounded like a warning. Then she left. I got to work, but couldn't focus on anything. Around noon, my phone rang. Reggie. I answered and stepped outside. He asked how I was doing. I said I'd been better. He said what I did last night took guts. Said he was proud of me. My throat got tight. He kept talking. Said B's been treating me like that for years, and someone needed to say something. That he should have said something sooner. Hearing him validate it made something in my chest loosen. I hadn't realized how much I needed someone else to say it was wrong. To say I wasn't crazy for being hurt by it. Reggie said, after we left, Hal and a couple of other people talked about how uncomfortable they'd been with the way B treated me. How they didn't know if it was their place to say anything, but they'd noticed. They'd all noticed. For years. Reggie said he was sorry for not having my back before. Said he should have spoken up a long time ago instead of just watching it happen. I told him it was okay, that I appreciated him saying something last night. The rest of the afternoon dragged. I left work at 5 and drove home slowly. B's car was already in the driveway. I sat in my car for a minute before going in. She was in the living room, still in her work clothes. She didn't say hello, just launched right into it. She said I humiliated her in front of our friends, made her look like a monster, that she was just asking for bread and I made it into this huge thing, that I turned everyone against her over nothing. I told myself to stay calm. I said it wasn't about the bread. She knew that. It was about snapping her fingers at me, about doing it in front of everyone, about doing it dozens of times over the past few years. She said she's never snapped at me, said I was exaggerating, being dramatic. I listed examples, at Hal's barbecue last summer, at her work party in December, at my parents' house on Christmas. Each time I brought one up, she waved it away, said I was being oversensitive. I realized she genuinely didn't see anything wrong with what she'd been doing. That scared me more than if she'd been doing it on purpose. At least, if it was on purpose, she'd know it was wrong. I told her I wasn't asking for permission to feel disrespected anymore, that things needed to change between us. I said I needed her to stop correcting me in conversations, stop answering questions people asked me, stop snapping her fingers at me ever again. She said I was being controlling, that her confidence was what I loved about her when we met. I told her there's a difference between confidence and making your partner feel small, that I fell in love with someone who lifted me up, not someone who treats me like a project she's embarrassed by. Something flickered across her face, maybe recognition, maybe just more anger. She turned away without saying anything more, walked to the bedroom and closed the door quietly. That somehow felt worse than slamming it. The next week felt strange. B moved around the house like she was walking on glass. She didn't snap her fingers once, but she found other ways to show me she was holding back. Heavy sighs when she wanted something, long pauses before asking me to pass the salt. At dinner, she'd open her mouth to speak, then close it and shake her head like she was stopping herself from saying what she really wanted to say. It felt like watching someone in handcuffs pretending they weren't restrained. On Wednesday, we stopped at a coffee shop near her office. I was ordering at the counter when B stepped up beside me. She opened her mouth and I could see her about to correct my order. Then she caught herself, pressed her lips together, stepped back, and made this big, sweeping gesture with her hand, like she was presenting me to an audience, like she was being so generous by letting me finish ordering my own coffee. The barista looked confused. In the car, Bay said she was really trying and I needed to acknowledge that. I told her I saw her trying. What I didn't say was that it felt like she was performing good behavior instead of actually changing how she saw me. Thursday night, Hal texted about game night at his place Saturday. I showed B and she immediately said we should go, that it would be good for everyone to see we were fine. The way she said it made something in my chest tighten. She wasn't thinking about whether we were actually fine. She was thinking about how things looked to other people. Saturday came and we drove to Hal's in silence. When we walked in, she transformed. Suddenly, she was laughing and hugging everyone and making jokes. The life of the party. But she barely looked at me. During charades, she moved to the opposite side of the room, made sure we weren't on the same team. I made a joke about something stupid I did at work, and everyone laughed. I glanced glanced at B, and her face was completely blank, no smile. She turned away and started talking to someone else. She was punishing me, not by yelling or arguing, by taking away any warmth or connection when other people were watching, showing everyone else the charming version of herself while treating me like I wasn't there. Halfway through the night, I went to use the bathroom. When I came out, Reggie's girlfriend was standing in the hallway. She touched my arm and said she was glad I stood up for myself, that she'd been watching B dismiss me in conversations for years, and it always made her uncomfortable. Hearing a woman say that made something shift in my head. I'd been telling myself maybe I was being too sensitive, that maybe I didn't understand how women communicate. But here was a woman telling me B's behavior crossed lines, that it wasn't normal or okay. The drive home was quiet until we were about 5 minutes from the house. Then B exploded. She said I'd turned all our friends against her, that everyone was treating her differently, and it was my fault. I kept my eyes on the road and told her nobody treated her badly tonight. They just didn't watch her treat me badly and pretend it was fine. She said I was enjoying this, making her the villain. That accusation stung because part of it was true. Part of me had fantasized about people seeing what I dealt with, but I never wanted to hurt B or damage her friendships. I pulled into our driveway and told her I just wanted her to see me as an equal partner instead of someone she manages and controls. She said if I felt controlled, I should have said something years ago instead of ambushing her in public. I reminded her that I did say something multiple times over the past 2 years, that every time I brought it up, she told me I was being too sensitive. She went quiet. I watched her face change as she maybe realized how many times she'd shut me down, how many conversations she'd ended before they started. We sat there in the driveway in silence, and it felt like we were both mourning something we couldn't name. After a long time, she got out of the car and went inside. I followed a few minutes later. The next few days, B seemed smaller somehow. She asked me to do things instead of telling me, but it all felt mechanical, like she was following rules she didn't understand rather than actually changing how she saw me. I started noticing things I hadn't let myself see before, how I'd stopped telling stories at gatherings because she'd always interrupt or correct them, how I'd stopped suggesting restaurants because she'd override my choices anyway, how I'd become quieter and smaller over the years to avoid conflict. The realization of how much of myself I'd lost made me angry in a way I hadn't felt before. Not explosive anger, something colder and more permanent, like waking up from something and seeing clearly for the first time. Tuesday afternoon, Reggie called and asked if I wanted to go fishing on Saturday, just the two of us. I said yes before even thinking about it, then realized I hadn't done anything solo with friends in over a year. Saturday morning, I loaded my gear in Reggie's truck and we drove out to the lake. Being on the water felt like breathing fully for the first time in months. We didn't talk about anything important, just fishing and work and nothing that mattered. Reggie didn't push me to talk about B, didn't ask how things were going. That somehow made me want to open up more than if he'd tried to force it. The silence felt good, not heavy like the silence at home, just easy. After about an hour, Reggie asked how things were going with B. I told him I didn't know if she could actually change or if she was just waiting for everything to go back to normal. He asked what I wanted to happen. The question caught me off guard because I realized I didn't have a clear answer. Part of me wanted to save the marriage, but another part was just tired, exhausted from years of fighting to be treated with basic respect. Reggie nodded and said whatever I decided, he had my back, that he was sorry he didn't speak up sooner. I felt something loosen in my chest. Having friends who actually saw me clearly instead of just watching B perform. We fished until the sun started getting low and then packed up the truck. The drive back felt too short. I wasn't ready to go home yet, but I couldn't avoid it forever. When I walked in the door, B was sitting on the couch with her arms crossed. She asked where I was, and there was an edge in her voice that reminded me of how she used to keep tabs on my schedule, like I needed permission to do things. I told her I was fishing with Reggie. She said I should have texted, that she was worried. I told her she never worried before when I had plans. She just got annoyed if they interfered with what she wanted to do. She said that wasn't fair, that I was throwing the past in her face every chance I got. I told her I couldn't build a future on pretending the past was fine when it wasn't. She asked what I wanted from her then. I said I wanted her to actually understand why her behavior hurt me, not just perform different behavior to make me stop complaining. I wanted her to see me as a partner instead of a project she managed. B went quiet for a long time. Then she sat back down and asked me to explain it to her, really explain it. For the first time, she wasn't defending herself or making excuses. She just listened. I told her about how it felt when she snapped her fingers at me, how it made me feel like a servant or a child instead of a partner, how every time she interrupted me or answered questions for me, it felt like she was telling everyone I wasn't capable, that she was embarrassed by me. I watched her face as I talked and saw something shift. Genuine shame, not the defensive anger I was used to, actual understanding. She looked down at her hands and said she didn't realize how often she did those things, how they added up over time. She told me her mom was controlling like that with her dad, that she watched her dad just take it and never stand up for himself. She swore she would never be passive in a relationship like her mom mom was, but maybe she overcorrected. Maybe she went too far the other way. I told her there was a difference between being strong and making your partner weak. She nodded slowly, like she was trying to absorb something that never occurred to her before. Then I brought up therapy, couples therapy. B's whole body tensed, and she said therapy meant we were failing, that we should be able to fix this ourselves. I told her we were already failing, that therapy was us trying to fix it before it was too late. After a long pause, she agreed. I pulled out my phone right then and found a therapist with good reviews and availability. Made an appointment for the following week. B watched me do it, and I could tell part of her was still resistant. But she didn't argue. That felt like progress. Small progress, but progress. The week until the appointment dragged. B was careful around me. Too careful. Like she was walking on eggshells. I didn't know how to tell her I didn't want her to shrink herself either. I just wanted us to be equals. The day of the appointment, we drove to the therapist's office in silence. The waiting room had soft chairs and magazines nobody reads. We sat next to each other, but not touching. The session was awkward and tense. The therapist was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes. She asked us each to describe what brought us there. B went first and talked about how we'd hit a rough patch, communication issues. It all sounded so sanitized. When it was my turn, I told the truth. Told her about the snapping, the interrupting, the years of being treated like I wasn't capable. B shifted in her seat, but didn't interrupt. The therapist asked B why she thought she needed to control conversations and situations. Bia said she liked things done right. The therapist gently pointed out that right seemed to mean her way. I watched B wrestle with that. Watched her face go through denial, then defensiveness, then something that looked like recognition. Over the next month, we went to therapy every week. Each session revealed more patterns. B's fear of being seen as weak, like her mother. My tendency to avoid conflict even when I should speak up. How we both contributed to a dynamic where she pushed and I retreated until I finally pushed back hard enough that something broke. Things weren't fixed. Some days were harder than others. B would slip back into old habits and catch herself. Sometimes she'd apologize. Sometimes she'd get defensive about being called out. I was learning to speak up in the moment instead of letting things build. Instead of swallowing my feelings until they turned into resentment. We were rebuilding something different from what we had. Less about her being in charge and me going along with it. More about figuring out how to be actual partners. It was messy and uncomfortable and uncertain. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was in a relationship where I was allowed to take up space, where my voice mattered. That felt like a foundation we could actually build on if we both kept trying.